Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here to a little Saturday morning edition of Duval Daily. We've got a couple prospective draft picks the Jaguars are showing interest in hosting on official team visits. That's Colby Wooden, defensive lineman from Auburn, Scott Matlock, defensive lineman out of Boise State. Two really intriguing prospects. We're going to dive into them here. And the reason I'm going to go ahead and combine these two is because I think they play similar roles, and I think they play similar roles to several of the guys that the Jaguars have already shown interest in when you talk about some of the guys that they've been either working with them at their pro days or hosting them on official visits. And the guys I'm talking about, Tyler Lacey, Jacqueline Roy. I think when you look at Yaya Diaby, there's a little bit of that as well. But for me, these are two prospects that played both defensive end and interior defensive line in college at certain points in certain situations for their teams. And I project both to do the same at the next level if they're to end up in Jacksonville. Colby Wooden is a guy, again, out of Auburn, played a lot of defensive end for Auburn. I think if the Jags bring him in, he's in more of like a Roy Robertson Harris type role, that developmental track that the Jaguars would potentially have him come in, be a rotational player early on, and maybe potentially he could become a Roy Robertson Harris type of player for them. He has really good length at his size, nearly 34-inch arms at 6'4", 275 pounds. I think he may have played a little bit bigger than that. Big 10.5-inch hands, 4'7", 940 at that size, pretty damn good, especially if you're projecting him to take pass rush snaps more on the interior, which is exactly what I would project for both Colby Wooden and Scott Matlock here. I think Colby Wooden in base, you can kick him out there, 3-4 defensive end. He can definitely set the edge for you. Again, I think he has the length and strength and physicality to get that job done out there. And then when you switch into your nickel packages where you have 4 down linemen or whatever you have going on up front, kind of kick him inside, get him rushing against guards and centers. I think you have big mismatches there, again, with his explosiveness and with his length. It's just really difficult for, I think, centers and guards to handle what he can do up front. And he's got a little bit of a pass rush arsenal on the interior there. When you talk about really, really explosive off the ball, got a swim move, swipe, he can displace offensive linemen's hands. I think he's a really fun player, and 14 career sacks. A lot of those have come from the interior, 29.5 tackles for loss. This is a prospect that I think, again, if you bring him in here year one, can you get some rundown productivity out of him and interior pass rush productivity? I think you could. And so I think it's a really intriguing prospect. Now, I don't know that he's ever going to be a full-time starter. I think he definitely has the talent to get there, but not quite there yet. And I think at Auburn, he played more defensive end than he did interior. I think at the next level, you probably want to see that shift a little bit more, especially from a pass rush perspective. If he's out there rushing the passer, I think you want him trying to penetrate, again, at like 3 tech or head up with a center, whatever it may be. I think that is where you're going to get the best advantage out of a Colby Wooden. And when you talk about Scott Matlock, I think the same exact thing. I think you play him base defensive end. When you get into your pass rush situations, you kick him inside, let him work against those guys. He's a good bit bigger than Colby Wooden from a mass profile, from a frame profile, but he does not have the same length. When you talk about Scott Matlock, not the same length as a Colby Wooden, but he's a bigger frame. I think he's about 296 pounds as Scott Matlock. Pulling up his RAS actually right now. But another guy who I think you see a lot of productivity out of, I think he's even more explosive off the ball than Colby Wooden, which is really impressive at his size. And he's a freak athlete. I mean, we're going to pull him up right now. Out of Boise State. A 9.65 relative athletic score. And Kent Lee Platt, Math Bomb on Twitter, does a tremendous job with all those. So arm length, again, Colby Wooden was about 34 inches. Scott Matlock just under the threshold for some teams at 32.75 inches. 9-inch hands, not great at your size, but again, nothing that's going to hold you back from being a productive interior player there. While Colby Wooden kind of lived more on the edge and then kicked inside at times, Scott Matlock lived a little bit more inside and kicked out to edge at times. But for me, I think in the NFL, definitely projecting them to have similar roles. Scott Matlock, 6'4", 296 pounds, 29 bench press reps, vertical of 29.5, broad of 905. The 40-yard dash at 296 pounds is one of the most impressive things. 4.98 40-yard dash and a 10-yard split of 1.69, which is blazing at that size. Good shuttle at 4.59 and a good three-cone, again, for his size at 7.31. He's a really good athlete, and it pops on tape when you turn it on. He is able to consistently use that explosiveness to get off the ball, and even though he doesn't have the greatest length, he's able to get inside the chest of offensive linemen consistently and just drive them back. And he does well to disengage. He does well to keep his feet moving. I think he has the lateral mobility to work on stunts and games up front. Again, a bigger overall guy. He's 296 pounds. Colby Wooden is more about 273, 275. So not the same from a mass standpoint, but I think they are similar in the type of impact that they could bring to your team. And same thing with a Tyler Lacey type of guy. I think you work those guys, base defensive ends, interior rushers and pass rush situations, and I think that's how you win with these types of prospects. Early on, they could be duking it out with a guy like Adam Gotsis for rotational reps, right? Things like that. So I definitely think both of these prospects could bring value to the Jaguars in year one. I think both of them are definitely not going to be like first or second round picks. Could Colby Wooden or Scott Matlock sneak into the third round? I think it's possible, but my guess would be they're going to be early day 3 picks, probably in round 4. Maybe they slide to round 5. This is a really deep class, in my opinion, when you talk about edge rushers and when you talk about guys that can rush from the interior. And that's exactly what these players are to me. At least I hope that's how the Jaguars would value them as well, because I think that is where you're going to win with these guys at the next level, rushing them from a interior spot and then playing run defense on the edge. Not on the edge, but defensive end. A little bit of a wider alignment there. 5 tech. But that is going to do it here. Hopefully this enlightened y'all a little bit on Colby Wooden and Scott Matlock. The Jaguars are showing a ton of interest in these types of prospects. The Jaguars are also showing a ton of interest in edge rushers. You've had them show interest in Keon White, who is going to have a visit with them as well. Byron Young out of Tennessee, Nolan Smith out of Georgia, BJ Ojolari out of LSU, Yaya Diaby out of Louisville, Felix Anudike-Uzomah out of Kansas State. And then, again, from the interior penetration kind of role, Brian Bresee, Jacqueline Roy, Tyler Lacey, Scott Matlock, and, of course, Colby Wooden. So I think the Jaguars are definitely trying to fortify that defense. They're trying to bring in some guys that probably can give them some juice, both on the edge and on the interior. That's what they're showing you so far. A lot of their pre-draft visits and a lot of the guys that they've gone and worked out at their pro days, it's been defensive front players for the most part. That will do it. Thank you so much for tuning in here on a Saturday, Duval. Hope you have a great weekend. Hit me up on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo. Let me know what you think about these prospects. You can also like and subscribe here on YouTube. Drop a comment in the comment section below. Y'all have a good one.